What's good, everyone? Welcome back to the channel, guys. So another SWI, and obviously still worth it if you guys are new to the channel. And this time we're going to be taking a look at another Samsung phone that honestly I haven't really seen anybody talk about, and it was just another phone that I had in my drawer, so I'm like, dude, I have to talk about this. And at a time, this was a phone where I kind of wanted, but there was really no reason to get it, so I was like, all right. But in a lot of other ways, it was actually super entertaining, and this phone, in my opinion, pretty much shifted the rest of the way how Samsung basically made their phones. And this phone, we give this phone too much credit, the S6 Edge. The phone before this, which was the Note Edge, that one kind of pioneered it in my opinion. But regardless, the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge is probably one of the most fascinating phones in my opinion. It came out at a time where, Samsung took a really weird approach, and they kind of bashed their own reputation in a lot of ways, but they kind of fixed themselves since then, so that's totally okay. Now, this phone did come out in 2015 in March, so it's at this point it's over 4 years old. It's probably turning 5 years old next year. Not probably, it is turning 5 years old next year. And from holding this phone and from looking at it, you can tell it's kind of an older phone, but you wouldn't think it feels like a super old phone or super cheap phone. This phone feels like a very premium phone still. On the front, you have a 5.1-inch Super AMOLED display. That display is 1440p with 577 pixels per inch. Now, I've had many Samsung Galaxy S6 Edges, and this panel definitely is one of its highlights. It's a very good looking panel. It has a lot going for it. It gets super bright. The colors seem really nice. However, one of the biggest disadvantages of getting an older phone, especially even an older Samsung or even older Android for that matter, is that burn-in is so bad on these displays. It's so hard to find an S6 Edge or any phone for that matter that doesn't have burn-in that's not like $16,000. And one thing I've noticed is with the iPhones, especially with like the iPhone 10 and all those, very few of those phones have burn-in. That phone came out in 2017. I see a lot of Galaxy S8s, and I have a Galaxy S8 and even an S8 Plus that have a lot of burn-in. I even have S9 and S9 Pluses that have a lot of burn-in. My iPhone 10 does not, and this S6 Edge does have quite a bit of burn-in on it, which is I'm kind of salty about, but it's whatever. On the bottom, you have a micro USB port, no USB Type-C, a headphone jack. Up top, you only have the SIM ejector. And on the back, one thing I really like about the back is that it's completely flat. Like, there's no curves, there's no nothing. The only edge part is on the sides of the phone, which, was like the pioneering thing about this phone and what differentiated this phone from the S6, the standard one. But that back, I really like it. It's just kind of cool. It's kind of fascinating to me. And there's not a lot of phones out there that just have a super flat back, but the camera does protrude a little bit, which kind of is annoying, but single camera sensor on the back. And overall, this phone, in terms of the looks, it really hasn't, held up that well. It's kind of, a little bit outdated. It has a lot of bezel on it and everything, but in terms of the feeling of it, it still feels like a pretty good phone. So at least it has that going for it. Now, that pretty much covers it up in terms of the outside. Nothing too crazy going on here. One of the biggest disadvantages of this phone was the lack of the micro SD card slot and a removable battery, which is what Samsung took the approach on, when they went that way. And a lot of people hated on it. I really didn't like it at the time. I think I had in like an LG G2 when this phone came out, and my phone didn't have a removable back or a micro SD card slot, so I wasn't really salty about it. But this phone didn't have either of those things. Coming from a Galaxy S5 to an S6 Edge users, I can only imagine their frustration, to be honest. But like I said, that pretty much covers it up in terms of the outside. Now, this thing did start with Android 5.0.2 Lollipop. You were able to upgrade it to Android 7.0 Nougat. Now, you're still on TouchWiz UI, technically speaking. And one of the weirdest things is not only is this thing still pretty super bloated, not only is TouchWiz super weird, but one of the weirdest things in my opinion about TouchWiz and just even like Android UI in general, with a lot of these, like stock Android is perfectly fine, but with like LG's UI and all these other people, it's like there's so many noises and random pop-ups that come up with these type of phones, and it's so obnoxious. With my S10 or S9, it's like these phones just buzz all the time randomly, and they just like keep talking. They're just like so annoying. It's so unnecessary. With my iPhone, no pop-ups, no nothing, no noises unless you want there to be a noise. With my S6 Edge, I'll just like be doing something and I'll just hear a little random pop or something like that. I'm like, why is this so annoying? Even when I was going through the whole setup and everything, like you keep hearing like those bubble noises and everything. I'm like, that's so obnoxious. And that's one of my least favorite things about TouchWiz and even Samsung One UI. Like even now, it's still pretty bad. They've gotten better since then, but this one is still stuck on TouchWiz. So take what you will from that, but in my opinion, TouchWiz, honestly, I think everybody will agree it was not the best thing. It was very clunky. One UI and even One UI 2 does improve it overall, but it still, has a long way to go in my opinion. But however, one thing to note is that you can custom ROM this thing, which is super nice. I don't know how many custom ROMs there are for this thing, but I know there is a root out for this thing, and I know you can custom ROM it. So there's many custom ROMs I'm sure out for it. I'm sure you can find Android Oreo ROMs, even maybe Android Pie ROMs. Maybe there'll be an Android 10 ROM ported over eventually if there's not already one. But yeah, that pretty much covers it up in terms of the software. Now hitting on the performance, okay, this thing has an Exynos 7420 octa chipset, an octa-core CPU, and 3 gigabytes of RAM. Now with 3 different models of the S6 Edge, a 32, 64, and 128 gigabyte model, all those models have 3 gigabytes of RAM. Now what I can tell you is that the initial performance, so like when I'm loading it up, when I'm doing things with it, it's really not too bad. It is a little stuttery, like it doesn't seem like super smooth, but what I will tell you is that it doesn't feel that bad. Like once you just boot up a phone, and by the way, I have it in my hand right now while I'm talking about this, while you're booting things up, it doesn't seem too slow. You know, I'm sure like if I compared it to the S10, I would be able to see a humongous difference, but it's really not that bad. It's only when you kind of get into some more multitasking type of things, like if you have a lot of apps in the background, that's when things really start getting bogged down. For example, if I open the Play Store right now, some phones like the S10 right now, even the S9 Plus, it's almost like instantaneous those things open. My 11 Pro, same exact thing. For this one, it does take like a second or two, and that's for like a minor app like a Play Store. When I get into the more intensive things, like even like Temple Run, dude, like it's such a basic game, and I hate saying it, and I know you guys don't like talking about it, but it's such a basic game. But even this one, it kind of does, you know, get a little bit, you know, noticeable in terms of like, oh, there's a little bit of lag here or there. In terms of loading speeds though, they're pretty much okay. But once you, even closing apps sometimes though, I notice it kind of takes like an extra second. You know, you would expect it nowadays to be like instantaneous on iPhones with the home button still, you know, it's almost like instantaneous. For this phone, it's a little bit different in my opinion. But when you do kind of get into those like Real Racing 3 games and things like that, that's when you're going to be able to notice the biggest differences. Those games do stutter quite a bit. Initial loading isn't really that bad, but once you do get into the game, that's when you do notice, okay, yeah, there's a lot of glitchiness going on. It's still completely playable though. I mean, it's nothing too crazy. I mean, it's kind of weird, but I could be able to get over it in like 20 seconds. But for the average user, I'm sure they probably won't care either. But for someone who uses phones all the time like me and like, you know, and has the like latest phones, I mean, you can definitely see there's some difference. But again, if you're somebody who just needs something to get by, or you just need something for the time being, or you even own it now, it's probably not that big of a difference. What I want to do is I want to custom ROM this phone, or a phone of, you know, some other phone, and see the difference in performance and seeing if it's worth it to go and upgrade in terms of, you know, the custom ROM, go and update your software, or stay on the lowest version on an older phone and see which one is faster. So in terms of performance, I'm sure you're not even getting this phone or even considering this phone in terms of performance, but it's okay. It gets the job done kind of. Some apps are still supported, some apps are not supported because it's on Android Nougat, so you have to download basically the older versions of those apps, but it's really not that big of a deal if you're okay with it. But that pretty much covers that. Now let's hit on the camera. This thing has a single 16 megapixel camera on the back. It is a wide angle lens, which is really nice. You are able to shoot 4K at up to 30 frames per second, which is really nice. And what I can tell you is that the overall camera really isn't that bad. I think my camera has an issue with it because on my previous S6 Edges and even my S6s, I've had really no complaints about it. I felt like they were really nice. For this one though, it seems like it's a little washed out, so I'm not really too sure what's going on with it. But the other cool thing about this camera is that, like I said before in other Samsung phones, you are able to change quite a bit of settings with it, which is really nice. You also have a lot of other settings, you know, skin tone, things like that, which is really nice. And I remember with the Galaxy S5, even the Galaxy S4, dude, they literally just put all the features they had at the time into that phone, which is so cool. And this one, it seems like they kind of stripped away some features, but it's still more than like an iPhone 11 or something like that. So in terms of the camera and sheer quality, I think it's pretty decent. You do kind of lack some new features, you know, some hardware features that new phones have, such as the ultra wide sensor and telephoto lens. So that's really one of the biggest disadvantages of getting a phone that's kind of older, is because you miss out on those things. So you have a 5 megapixel front facing camera, and it's pretty bad, I'm not gonna lie. You can do 1440p videos on it, which is nice, but overall what I can tell you is camera sensors, they're decent. The camera sensors, the back is pretty good, the front is really bad, but that pretty much covers it up in terms of the camera. Now one of the biggest disadvantages, sorry my voice went a little weird, of getting the Galaxy S6 Edge coming from a Galaxy S5 was the battery life, and that's still one of the biggest issues. This thing has a 2600 mAh battery, and a lot of people experience a ton of different battery issues with this S6 Edge and even the S6. A lot of battery shutdowns, a lot of random reboots, a lot of even break devices. And a lot of that was attributed to the battery itself. Now this S6 Edge that I have now, this battery life is really bad. I charged this thing fully and I barely even used it. I unplugged it 2 minutes ago and it's already at 97% and I did nothing to it. I probably had like 2 minutes of screen on time. So the problem with this battery is that you have a very powerful phone. You have a phone that has a very bright Super AMOLED display, 1440p, but you have a 2600 mAh battery. That's so small. That's smaller than a lot of phones that we have in the market right now. So what I can tell you is, without a doubt, the S6 Edge's battery is not one of its highlights, it's definitely one of its cons, and it's only gotten smaller and degraded over time, so it's not at the full 2600, it's probably at like 2000 or probably even less than that. So what I can tell you is that this phone, if you have it now, it's not a horrible pickup. It's not like a phone that you're going to pick up and be like, oh my god, it's such a horrible phone. Like, you're going to feel it and you're going to be like, wow, this phone is still really, really nice. It has a lot going for it. If you're going to give it to your grandma or something like that, or even yourself, if your use case and if you're not going to use a phone for that much, then you're going to be perfectly set with the S6 Edge, I think. But for a majority of you, I don't even think you're considering one. The lowest Samsung phone I would go on the tier list is the S8. I would not go anything below an S8 if you're planning on keeping a phone for longer than like a year or two. If it's temporary, then the S6 Edge is fine, you know, great build quality, screen is amazing, fingerprint sensor up front, edge screen, which I didn't even hit on that much because I'm so used to, you know, all the screens being edge now, but really the main disadvantages are, you know, the battery life, the power, the software updates, and those are things that a lot of people might need. So I would recommend getting a Galaxy S8 or S8 Plus. That's the lowest I would go. So that is pretty much it, guys. If you want to pick up a Samsung Galaxy S8 or S8 Plus, I'll find the cheapest ones on Amazon and then link them straight down in the description below so you guys can get it from there and help support the channel at the same time. But that is pretty much it. If you guys have any other questions or anything, leave it down in the comment section as well. Hit that like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those links are linked down below. I'd really appreciate if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.